I like to tell my story a little backwards, and the reason I like to tell my story backwards is because it has truly impacted who I am today from a time when I was 6 years old and living in a different country. At the age of 6, my family and I fled the war-torn country of Bosnia. And also at the age of 6, I had one moment in my life that is very vivid to me as far as memory is concerned. As a 6-year-old, there are certain things that you don't remember, and then as a 6-year-old, there's things that you will forever remember that will stick with you every step of the way. My family was lined up in our front yard by 3 soldiers to be taken out for, one reason or another. Luckily, I didn't know that reason at that point in time. Soldiers were coming around to raid the homes of my town and take the males to a concentration camp. When we were lined up in our front yard, we were asked to have things ready. Anything that was worth anything, we gave to them. My mom had it all kind of prepared in a little bag, gold and money and things like that we could give to these soldiers. And I remember this one soldier asking my grandma for her earrings that she had in her ears while we were standing there, and kind of ripped them out of her ears because he didn't have half a finger, and he showed her his finger and said some very vulgar words and said, can't you tell that I need what you have in order to get a prosthetic finger put on? So that was one moment in time that was, you fear so much as a 6-year-old, but it wasn't the soldiers that I feared. It wasn't the guns that I feared. It wasn't, it wasn't fear for my toys or when I'm gonna eat next. But it was the fear of losing these people who were my protectors at the time. My mother went as far as sewing money into the inside seam of my pants, the pants of me and my sister, in case we were to separate from them, to be able to spend it on transportation or food. And so getting told that as a 6-year-old by your mother, you think to yourself, obviously I'm going to get separated from her, and it's not a very settling feeling. So my dad during this time was asked to put his hands behind his back, and in front of our house was kind of the main road, and all the men from our town and a few of the neighboring towns were being lined up in this lineup to be taken to the concentration camp. As the soldiers were taking him into this lineup, he kind of had his hands behind his back, and he was asked to do this. And as he did that, obviously I was thinking that this was the last time I was going to see my dad. And he had the courage to glance at us one more time before he got into this lineup, which, that look on his face, I'll never forget. And just him raising his hand just a little bit to kind of look over, I'll definitely never forget. And then he was in that lineup and they just took off. My mom then had the courage to take us out of this house, which we didn't have electricity. Obviously, we were running short on food, and to leave our house and to go find him in this concentration camp. And she walked us through our town until we got onto a bus to transport to this concentration camp. And she held us. She shielded us from things that she did not want us to see, which obviously were, casualties, burning homes, things like that no 6-year-old should ever see. And once we got to the concentration camp, we learned that my dad was still alive, and we are the lucky ones because he was still alive. Others did not make it that far. They were taken and buried in mass graves that we're digging up to this day and having their funerals, once a year. When we saw my dad, obviously we were delighted. He helped us figure out how we were going to stay there and spend the night before we found that there was a colony of semis and buses and trucks that were taking us to a city that was not occupied, which was Travnik, and that was in southern Bosnia. So the day we were leaving, my dad was staying behind. He was staying in the concentration camp, and my mom, my sister, and I, my grandmother, and one of my aunts was with us. We're saying goodbye to him. So not only did I just say goodbye to him 2 weeks ago, thinking that I'll never see him again, but now I'm doing this again. And another changing moment in my life was just my mom prying us away from him, again, bringing that fear back of losing the person that is somebody that has protected you in your little years that you've had of your life. So as she pried us away from him, we truly were one of the luckiest people on earth in that moment in time, because my aunt recognized a soldier that was at that concentration camp and begged him and paid him to get my dad smuggled out of the concentration camp. So as we got onto this semi that was a huge semi that was packed with people, it was just it was hot, and people were holding on to the rails of these semis. That's how packed they were. We took off, and then the semi stops, and through, people are kind of moving and shifting around in front of us, and here comes my dad. My dad was able to make it out of that concentration camp into this semi and able to get away with us and drive to the city of Travnik. And then after that, a lot more happened, but we definitely knew that at that point in time we were probably going to get a chance to stay together, which was exactly what we wanted, the only thing we wanted. We're so lucky. We're so lucky because there are so many that never made it out of that concentration camp and never made that journey that can't talk about it in the same way I talk about it. So, happy ending to that story.